how we know the day of the Lord is here. It begins with Jeremiah 31, when God says, see, a time is coming, 3 times, summarizing in chapter 31, the lands bloom again, and the cities are restored. Jerusalem is rebuilt, larger than it was in antiquity. And God says, I will make a new covenant with his people, not like the covenant he made with their fathers out of Egypt. But the reality is, it's an amendment and reaffirmation of the first covenant. The land lay desolate for over 2,000 years after the Roman dispersal, after Rome destroyed the temple, and I think there was 3 different revolts by the Jews. The first being in 70 Common Era. But anyway, that's what dispersed the Jews across the world. Primarily in Europe at first. And it's not like there weren't any Jews there before this, but it became official in 1948 when the state of Israel was created, considered a country today. The Jews have returned. The lands do bloom. Cities have been restored. And Jerusalem is a metropolitan area now, far larger than anything in antiquity. And that means the new covenant is here. Where is the covenant, and who delivers it to the Jewish people? Well, there are only 2 undelivered covenants. Covenant of friendship that you find in Ezekiel 34 and 37 that comes with Moshiach, who God calls my servant David, a shepherd, not King Moshiach. And the covenant that we just saw in Jeremiah 31, that is a covenant of sin forgiveness. Now it says, I'm going to make a covenant with you and write Torah on your hearts, and everyone shall heed me. But it ends with, because this Torah on your heart, for I will forgive your sins and remember your iniquities no more. He did this for the Assyrian Babylon exiles, and they built the second temple as a holy seed. And they are a holy seed again today. And we have a temple to build. Okay, so this takes you to Malachi chapter 3, verse 1, where God says he is sending his messenger, who indeed is Elijah, to clear the way for him, and he will return to his temple. So it's Elijah who's clearing. It's not David that builds the temple. There's nothing about that. It's Elijah. But there's more to it, and I'll get to it in just a minute. And verse 1 concludes with, and the angel of the covenant that you desire is already on the way. That would be the covenant of sin forgiveness. Again, the other one comes with David. So this is the chapter God announces the day of the Lord. I'm coming back. Getting one of my prophets to clear the way for me. And I'm coming back. And I'm going to establish a new covenant. So that's how we know it's the day of the Lord. It's very simple. The Jews came back. They cultivated the land. It's a beautiful, beautiful country from in the east, west, north, and south. And again, as I said, Jerusalem rebuilt. So the new covenant's here. Who does the angel of the covenant that you desire give the covenant to for delivery? I'm sending my messenger. Elijah's the only person mentioned in that chapter. He's going to give it to Elijah. But what else is important about that? Elijah is the only man in the Hebrew Bible to specifically be taken to heaven by God. And after all that time, he's back again in the day of the Lord. He can talk to the angel because he's been in heaven for over 2,000 years. That's why it's important to use Elijah in that chapter. And you don't see David, or you don't. But in any event, okay, so what are the other prophecies to be completed? You know, prophesy that I will make a covenant in the future. See, a time is coming. What else are we waiting for? There are still 3 men to come in the Hebrew Bible who are Moshe, Elijah, and the prophet like Moses. Each of these great men were righteous, and all 3 were servants of God. There's 1 more man to come, so there's 4 in total. 2 covenants, 4 men. Prophecy of the Hebrew Bible completed. 4 righteous servants to come, and a description of just 1. God's righteous servant of Isaiah 53. Which means he has to be all 4. He's all 4 men. You have to have a description. You know, Judaism has gotten away from that by saying Isaiah 53 really describes the Jewish people as the man Israel, which I don't think much of I've read their commentary on it. To me, it's an absurdity and ridiculous. And I'll get to that's in some of my other videos and in the book that the videos come from. But God's got to have a representative, and the sages of the Talmud, and the rabbis back then believed Isaiah 53 described Moshe, the anointed one of Isaiah 11, because they knew it was patently obvious. You got to have a description. You know, I hear these ridiculous things. Well, I'll look out the window and Torah will be on every heart, Toby, a singer says. Or, we'll know because the Messianic era is here. The world will be at peace. The world will exalt the Jew. And now everybody will recognize that the Jew's been right about God all along. All Christians will say, we were wrong. There is no Jesus. All Muslims are going to suddenly say, well, we had it all wrong. There's no Allah. Which means God, as we know him, is the God of the Jews. Yeah, that's how you're supposed to know. No, I just showed you how. The land blooms again. Jerusalem rebuilt. The cities like, Java, Tel Aviv, all those cities restored. And there's a new covenant. Well, that just takes you straight to Malachi 3, Day of the Lord. So the last page he talks to the prophets. They say the Bible closed when they start talking to his prophets. Well, that's the last one. I don't know if he really was the last prophet, but as far as the way the Tanakh is set up in the book of the prophets, that's the last page. Here's my final word on everything. See y'all when you get back. Because he knew this was one of the exiles, Jeremiah writing this, who came back to, those exiles came back to build the second temple. But in any event, that was Isaiah. Jeremiah was writing for the dispersal. So, who does not fit every verse to be God's representation in this day of the Lord? Who will clear the way for him by having the third temple built for his return to dwell amongst his people forever? That's part of the covenant of friendship. And notice the forever. And it also says you'll never be defeated and dispersed again. So this is no small thing. But it's not the Messianic era, and I'm going to get to that. And deliver the last 2 covenants. Well, it's certainly not Jesus. And it cannot possibly be the Jewish people as the man Israel. Now, how's every Jew going to be his prophet? To tell the Jews that he's here. None of it would make sense. And he's got to have a man. Like a Moses. And prophet like Moses, righteous servant. And it also must be a man who fits every verse, who must live in a Gentile country, Christian country, because God comes from Adam. And of course, God knew that the way the story was going to unfold, beginning with Abraham, is that Esau, brother of Jacob, who was renamed Israel, Esau only married non-Jewish women. And all of his descendants are considered Edomites. And they had a place kind of by in the Negev that was considered Gentile lands. And but also Edom is in where Jordan is now, east of the river. So he said, I'm coming from Gentile lands. I'm coming from, if you want to say what used to be Edom, because it was destroyed some time ago. And it says, this is Isaiah 63, and of the peoples, and when he says it like that, he's talking about his peoples, and of the peoples, none are with him. So he's coming with a Gentile from a Gentile country. And that's, who can believe what we have heard? You see in 53:1, who can believe this? Why didn't we know this? Why didn't we figure this out? Next question you got to ask yourself is, how did I figure it out? And everything else I know. God had me type. These are things from the book, Isaiah 53 and the day of the Lord. And there's a lot of other things in it besides the day of the Lord in Isaiah 53. But if you really want to know how to discern, decipher, and figure out Isaiah 53, that's the best source on the planet, period. Because God said, this is how I wrote it up. This is why, I know a lot more than I'm even getting to. On the ins and outs of how God wrote this book, the Hebrew Bible. He didn't just have the Torah written by Moses. He basically dictated the entire Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, to one man or another. If it's the book of Jeremiah, just say it was Jeremiah. Whether it was or wasn't doesn't matter. But and of course Isaiah but basically the whole book. Okay, getting back to this Messianic era. This is what it's supposed to be like. The Rambam says in his Mishnah Torah that in the Messianic era, quote, Moshiach will compel all of Israel to walk in the way of the Torah, perfect the entire world, motivating all the nations to serve God together. There will be neither famine nor war, neither envy nor competition. The entire world will be solely to know God. And the Jews, therefore, will be great sages and know the hidden matters with an understanding of their Creator to the full extent of human potential. I wouldn't want to be in that world. This is made up. This is a religious man thinking this would be my perfect world. This religious man who does nothing but study Torah and the Bible and the Talmud. This is his perfect world. This is not my perfect world. I don't want anything to do with this world. I don't want to be in a world that is solely to know God. I want a world where there's competition, where people want to excel, people want to rise above others. Anything. Everybody in the world's going to go out and pray and worship every day, all day long, just to know God, get a spiritual connection. Who's going to get the food? They say food will be everywhere. Nobody will ever go hungry. Who's going to be doing that if they're not solely knowing on God? It's just, but this is a religious man. This is his perfect world. This is not a world God said he was bringing. And that's where it really, really, really angers him. So, if I haven't made it clear, the Spirit of God alighted upon me, and like Ezekiel entered me, and God is in the Spirit. I am a man of divine beings. They're talking to me as I'm talking to you right now. Just a little direction here and there from these writings. No man could do these things. Moshe is supposed to compel all of Israel to study Torah. Good luck. Okay, I'm him. Now, you know how many atheists there are? 30% of the Israeli Jews are observant. Okay, that's 70% that's not. Now, how you even going to convince them of who I am if they don't even read the Bible? It's just a statement that it sounds great, it's fun to teach, people want to hear it, but if you really give it some thought, this is not what I'd say 95% of the world would agree with. The 5% being very religious people who would just love the idea of just sitting around trying to know God. There's nobody on this planet that knows him better than me. I've been being prepared for this for 13 straight years. 13 straight years of the fire of refinement to change me, to change my anger, to change my emotions, to teach me all this, and and write 2 books. And now we've been doing videos. Okay, so there's Rambam. There's your Messianic era. Some people add even more crazy things to it. But in stark contrast, now let's see what God does say. Because he doesn't say any of that. And he didn't create a world like that. Why didn't he just start from scratch and say, I want a world where everybody just wants to know me? Well, he didn't do it. In stark contrast, and completely refuting the teachings by Rambam, continuing today, is God's covenant of friendship that comes with Moshiach. This is where everything Rambam just said should be. It should be repeated right here. God's covenant of friendship that comes with Moshiach and a couple of his promises in Jeremiah 31, again, stand in stark contrast to the words of Rambam. In the day of the Lord, when Moshiach comes, God promises, this is in the covenant of friendship, he will send down the rain in its season. The trees of the field shall yield their fruit, and the land shall yield its produce. The Jewish people shall continue secure on their own soil and never be overthrown and uprooted again. They shall no longer be a spoil for the nations. He will establish for them a planting of renown. They shall no more be carried off by famine. They shall not have to bear the taunts of the nations. They shall know that the Lord their God is with them, and they, the house of Israel, are his people. He will establish them and multiply them. He will place his sanctuary among them forever. His presence shall rest over them. And when his sanctuary abides among them forever, the nations will know that the Lord sanctifies Israel. This is what prevents you. This is the purpose that might prosper of 53. Because God's telling you, I know my sanctuary is not there in the day of the Lord. When the friendship comes. I know it's not there. But I'm going to place it there. And the nations will know. Basically, get the temple built. Let the nations know God sanctifies Israel. That will prevent the Middle East from destroying you one day. And I say that because the end of Malachi 3 says if Elijah does not clear the way from him, if Elijah does not clear the way and that third temple is not built, utter destruction comes to the land of Israel. Now he says, I will come with utter destruction, but he is his creation. My creation is going to destroy you one day. Now, there's no timetable on it. But Elijah's, and that's me. I'm Elijah. I'm the prophet like Moses. I'm his servant David, Mashiach. And I am the righteous servant. And I'm a man in divine beings. And see, no man could get this done, do all these things, write these books of his own. I mean, they have to come to you. And that's all a man in divine beings is. Judaism said, Jacob said, I've wrestled with a man in divine beings all night. And of course, during that wrestling, God speaks and renames him to be Israel. And Judaism said he wrestled with an angel. Well, I can promise you, I'm no angel. I've never been anything likened to an angel. That's part of the reason God wrote my book, The Life of God's Righteous Servant, so you can see how my life fits in to Isaiah 53. It's the exact opposite of Jesus Christ. I mean, the man is the exact opposite from an unblemished Lamb of God. I mean, he's crushed with disease, so he'll offer himself for guilt. Okay, also, there's nothing on the day of the Lord in Judaism. Nothing in Judaism of God coming with utter destruction to the land of Israel if the purpose of Elijah does not prosper. Utter destruction to the land does not fit the sages and rabbis, Messianic era, and world to come, which you don't really hear much about, but I mean, if you think the Messianic era is something that is an impossibility, you ought to read about the world to come. When Moshiach comes. So they ignore it. They cherry pick. They're picking out the fun, good things. They're turning a blind eye to utter destruction and recognizing Elijah. Why are you looking for Moshiach? If Elijah doesn't get what he's supposed to be done, clear the way, utter destruction, there ought to be signs at every synagogue. Have you heard anybody say they're Elijah? You ought to be worried about it. That's not what's happening. God's creation is perfect. This is in addition to that utter refutation of the Messianic era. God just told you what I'm going to do. Basically, I'm going to be there with you and nobody's ever going to take you off. We're not going out perfecting the world. The world's not going to speak Hebrew. The world's not going to exalt the Jew and hold them up high and say they've been right about God all along. Did God just say he was going to do that? Did he say he was going to have those things done? No. He says you won't be the taunt of nations. They'll know that I am here with you and you are my people. Okay, why is creation so harsh? Why is it so tough? Why did God make it like it is? Perfectly as he wants it, of course. He wants it for every Jew as his chosen, knowing full well what they're going to go through, to mold their personalities, to be the kind of people who can go through strife and hardship and decimation and survive and come back to his land that he gave them and populate it again, and so on, and just the general culture, just the people they are, and how talented and brilliant they are. To mold the personalities of the angels of a new host of God in the heaven he is creating where the name Israel shall endure. Late in Isaiah, it's, in answer to the question, God. Okay, picking back up towards, again, the latter, to the last or the next to last chapter of Isaiah, God says, I am creating a new heaven and a new earth. So he's talking about when this earth no longer exists. That at that point in time, he's going to do it again. He's going to make this, what Tovia Singer says is an imperfect world. And then God's going to come and fix that one day. God's going to flat out tell you, no, this is what I want. It's perfect. It's perfectly imperfect, but it's the way I want it. It's imperfect for you, but I'm God. This is my creation. I come first, Mr. Singer, in all things. And Keith will tell you that too, in no uncertain terms. So, he's creating a Jewish heaven. He calls it Jerusalem. The angels, Israel. That's what makes the new heaven. That is the new heaven. Out with the old angels, in with the new angels. None of which are Christian, by the way. There's nobody. God's not bringing any pagans, any worshipers of human sacrifice into heaven. This is just not going to happen. If somebody thinks that he is a God, not unlike the deities of the Aztecs and the Mayans, who believed that their God God's wanted human sacrifice, that God's wanted the blood. Well, that's not the God of creation. That's not Hashem. He didn't have anything to do with those kind of beliefs, much less that he would commit it and even further exasperate the problem with his son. Of course, Toby the singer upped everybody. He had him become a human sacrifice that God caused in some way, because his purpose was to drive the Jews back to the promised land. And the 6 million murdered and slaughtered and thrown into ovens as the Toby said, they're ram offerings as we would find in Leviticus. And Hitler got to keep their hides. The Christians just got one child. Toby the singer's got 6 million. And that's how he interprets Israel being this man of Isaiah 53. That's his logic. That's his reasoning. Nobody got long life. Nobody made anybody righteous, Hitler or the murderer. I can't tell who he's saying and did what. And God's purpose? God's purpose is to return to his temple in the day of the Lord, which means he's got to have somebody clear the way. That's why the righteous servant and Elijah, if you're going to find anybody, if you're going to say anybody is the man described in Isaiah 53, it would be Elijah. It'd be Elijah over Moshiach. But as it turns out, they're all righteous servants, all 4 men to come. And we got a description of one, and you're listening to him. There's no question about it. I've lived with him for 13 years. And it's not just his voice, his power. Ezekiel called them the cords of his power. To me, it's just, it just covers me head to foot, his power. I mean, he can manipulate my hands, my feet. He can make my heart race if he wants to. I mean, you can't imagine how many lessons I've had, how many stories I have of what 13 years of living with God and the angel of his presence is like. And it's different. I'm different from any other man on this planet. And in my knowledge of heaven, he really wants to stress that. That's Elijah too. Everything that he's taught me in vision, in body and in spirit, just to explain that to people. But, and the fact it's me, at this time, 13 years later, I don't even think about those kind of questions. If I ever did, it just is. Did I apply for the job? Was I a great guy who went to church every week or synagogue and this and that? No, I was an atheist for 50 years. I didn't start reading the Bible until 13 years ago, when God said, Keith, let's go to Barnes and Noble's, it's a bookstore, and get you a Tanakh. And I said, what's a Tanakh? I mean, I knew nothing of Judaism. My best friend was a Jew, but none of us talked about it. I don't know. I came up in the late 60s and the 70s, and I was born in 57, and we just never talked about it. So, yeah, I'm sure that the world's still like that. There's plenty of people like I was. But no, I just one day when I'm 50, he speaks to me. He says, I came to you at birth. And see, he's taking me on visions to many of the events of my life. And, it's not just remembering an event. I mean, he can really put the picture in your mind. You can be in the picture. But it's actually how you felt then, the ambience, just the way things felt at that time in your life, or the first time you drove a car. Exactly what it felt like. That's the kind of memory I have. I don't have the memory I used to have. That has a lot to do with his control of my thoughts. And that has to do with the teachings for heaven, because in heaven, you're not going to have your mind. He has to be the information of your mind, and I'm the walking proof of it. My mind does not think and remember as it once did. It's all in his control, and it's amazing. And with the angel, the Spirit of the Holy God who is a person. And God wants this world just like it is, with all its imperfections to us, for the very last Jew that's alive. They all have to go through it to be part of the Jewish heaven. He's not going to bring a heaven down here on earth as Mr. Rambam would want. Rabbi Rambam. Okay, and this teaching, this Messianic era teaching, what's the problem with it? It's a hindrance to me. It's a hindrance to the righteous servant of God, clearing the way. And what happens if I don't do it? And I'm going to get more into that in just a minute. What happens if I don't do that? Utter destruction is going to come to Israel. You got 7 million Israeli Jews, give or take, there today. That number ought to scare you. It ought to make you think about the Holocaust. It can happen. You know, the Titanic could not sink. Nobody was worried about it. Yeah, it could. That is one reason the teachers of a Messianic era are punished with a reckoning and dismissal when Moshiach comes. I've never heard any rabbi talk about the reckoning and dismissal, and what's the purpose for it? Well, one of them is God is forcing their hand. He said to me, if the rabbis do not listen to me through you as my prophet this time, I'm going to punish all of them. Y'all have to understand, you know, he's a celestial being. He's got emotions somewhat similar to us. That's, you know, our image in him. We're existing beings with emotions. And so is he, but as you can imagine, as old as he is, if you can imagine that, you'd have to imagine infinity. Nothing really bothers him. Nothing, actually, if it bothers him, it's because he's almost manufacturing it. But you know, it's to coerce them, the rabbis. If they want to get to the scroll of remembrance, they're all dismissed across the world. I don't care if they teach Messianic era or not. They're all dismissed. They need to go to what few people listen to them and go, there's no Messianic era. Just wanted you to know. Yeah. And of course, we got the 2 primary culprits here. Jews for Judaism, Tovia Singer. Who, by the way, I don't know. God won't tell me anything I can't find out of my own. And I can't find this out. I don't know if they've seen anything about me. But for people who are looking for Moshiach, and all the videos I've done, and the books I've done, and the number of years I've been doing this, I'd be surprised if they hadn't heard that there's somebody out there saying he's Moshiach. To coerce them, to recognize me. You know, if they want to go to heaven. And be in right standing with God. You know, they're in the proverbial doghouse right now. They got a lot of work to do, too, especially that Tovia Singer and his human sacrifice of the Holocaust that God caused. He offered himself for guilt, literally translated to be guilt offering. So we find that in Leviticus. And all of a sudden, he's putting a man into an animal sacrificial system like the Christians did. You can't just... That's my interpretation. I know the translation from Hebrew to English, and it's a guilt offering, go to Leviticus. No, I'm the man that went through it. I know what it's for, and I've told that story, and I got it in another video. But it's the emotion guilt. It's the emotion guilt. I have to go through the fire of refinement, punishment, wounding, chastisement, bruising, crushing, the big one, maltreatment, until he gets me where he wants me personality-wise. And I'm earning his power. In other words, I go through so many bad days that in future times, if people are really getting on me and they don't believe me, and 2 billion Christians hate me, want to crucify me, Muslims are calling for a jihad, anybody sees me in the street shooting, and this and that, Won't bother me a bit. And that's because he can control my emotions. And I've earned it through this fire of refinement. And so I offer myself for this fire of refinement to remove the guilt of the many made righteous and then the multitude, who are the witnesses in the first 6 verses that are quoted. There's a quote in verse 1 and it ends at 6. Just like in 52, there's a quote at 13 and it ends at 15, which I notice nobody else seems to know exists. You can find them in the JPS 1985 version that was started from scratch in the Leningrad Codex in 1955 or so, 55 to 57. So that's the other reason. One, punished for teaching this thing and saying God's going to come down here and change the world like that when it's all based on Rambam. They're not relying on Rambam's word. They're going to the Talmud and the studiers of the Talmud, and they rely on them more than the Scripture. It's the same way they say there's 10 lost tribes. No, there's not. Now, if you read Nehemiah and Ezra, I mean, the rabbis read the Bible 2 times, and then thereafter it's just Talmud? Because God didn't talk to those people. He didn't talk to Rambam. He didn't talk to Rashi. Never forget what the world will do to the Jewish people if it can, especially in the Middle East. And God has said in the Scripture that utter destruction is coming to the land of Israel, if the purpose of Elijah does not prosper, if the temple's not built. With Elijah involved, by the way, since he's with me. So it has to be a man who fits every verse, who must live in a Gentile country, because God comes from Adam. I think I just went over that already. And who must be a Gentile because of the Jewish people, none are with God. I am that man, fitting every verse of Isaiah 53 in a life orchestrated by God from birth. He's responsible for a lot of my accidents and some other sufferings. But he didn't speak to me until I was 50, and he did crush me with disease, colon cancer, lung cancer, and skin cancer in his power. And I'm a lawyer, so I guess that makes me a scholar. Crushed with disease. That's what this man is. A man of suffering, familiar with disease, and then later on crushed with disease. And a sinner, all kinds of problems during his life, and it's the exact opposite. I'm not the Antichrist, but I'm the exact opposite of the man Jesus Christ, and I fit Isaiah 53. He doesn't. So now this is where it gets important. This is where we're having, I don't know, what would you call it? Just read it. This is verse 3 of Isaiah 53. He was despised, shunned by men, a man of suffering, familiar with disease. As one who hid his face from us, he was despised. We held him of no account. Now, God had this written. And at the same time, I make the many righteous and then a multitude. So I got a feeling it all works out in the long run. But let's just say, you're talking about Elijah, shunned, despised. And that's what's going on right now. There hadn't been one rabbi say anything to me or comment, or a Jewish person. Even something silly like, are you serious? Yeah, I'm very serious. No contact, no anything. I'm a Gentile, not expecting that. I know more than they do, and yet they still think what they know is superior. Or they're saying, well, that's just my faith. That's, so now you're dealing with religious people, and I'm learning about it. That's just my faith. I have to believe that. Instead of believing it, I believe it. Yeah, well, there's 2 billion Christians believe in Jesus, and it's by faith. Does that make it right? Shouldn't they really go through that book and find all the lies and deceit? That's what you tell them. Yes, you would, rabbis. Well, I'm telling you the same thing. You need to listen to my words, and you need to go and read this book. If you don't want to read, I've done every single chapter of the book, Isaiah 53, the day of the Lord. It's in about, it's about 10 hours of work in 4 videos, because I combined 7 videos and 8 videos, and then there's, that's everything outside of Isaiah 53. Then I have the modern commentary on Isaiah 53, and it's real long, because there's 3 Isaiah 53s. There's the one with Rashi, the one with Tovia Singer and Jews for Judaism. We go over that. One of them in general, and with Jesus, the leper scholar versus Jesus. Now, if you want to find the version that is me, where I specifically say, verse by verse, this is how I satisfy this, it's at the end of the book on my life. And by then, you see, when I say these things, this is what he's referring to. That's where you find the commentary on Isaiah 53. It's actually out there already on another video, but for sure you can find it in the book if you want to read about it. And it's on video. Okay, here's the Midrash form. He was despised, shunned by men. He will be despised and shunned and held of no account simply for declaring, I'm that man. See, and I understand that. I mean, I get it. But you got to remember, I've been doing this for 13 years with him. And I'm just not like other folk. I mean, I'm still Keith. I still act towards people and talk to people the same way I always have. You know, except a lot nicer. But the chapter leading into the description of me, Isaiah, it starts in 53. God passes his wrath to the Christians. He's using me to do it. If you've seen some of the titles to my videos against them, I'll flat out say Jesus is a liar and the greatest deceiver of all time, based on the amount of people he's deceived. And there really is no Jesus. There never was. There never was. He's a story. And I can back that up. And it's on video. It has to do with the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Essenes. Their founder, his name is the teacher of righteousness. They were great followers of the book of Isaiah. They had a gate at Jerusalem when Jesus was alive and when he died, and all the way to the destruction in 70. That's when they hid all the scrolls and everything. They got decimated too during those revolts by the Jews. They had their own gate. And what did you do at the gate? You told stories because nobody could read. People throw you some money. The Essenes embodied Jesus. They didn't like the sinning in Jerusalem. Neither did he. They didn't like riches and material things. Neither did he. You know, and anyway, this story just evolved. There was all kinds of stories, but eventually it got put into a book in the year 70, Mark. And, of course, he doesn't fit it at all. They had to lie and had to see. So the prophecy was fulfilled. Go look it up. They try to hide it from you. They won't tell you who said it, where it is. And if you're a Christian who doesn't read the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, you just go with it. And so they are deceived. But you can find every one of them. And not one of them is true. Matthew's got 10 plus, maybe 15, so that the prophecy was fulfilled. No, it wasn't. And anyway, I bring the wrath. God uses me to bring the wrath, and I need God's servants, the Jewish people, to recognize me, stop shunning, stop despising. This is all happening. It's real. It's when it's supposed to happen. That's how this video started. This is the day of the Lord. He's got to have a man. So, and what else do I bring? You think the rabbis had, if anybody is talking to the rabbi, or the rabbi has seen some of these videos, one of the biggest viewing of that I have is on rabbis are dismissed. It's like they didn't know it. It's like, you gotta be kidding. No shit comes and we get dismissed? What's that about? It says dismissed from tending the flock. And that, again, you gotta know how to read the Bible. It's written first for the people in antiquity. That could be true back then. And nobody knew how many people there were. But today we know better. All the rabbis are going to keep tending to the flock. Gosh, is not going to recognize them anymore. Dismiss him, he says, I'm appointing David. That's me. And to do what? Be a shepherd. And what am I doing? You're listening to it. This is what I do as a teacher. I'm not a rabbi. Don't claim to be. Don't want to be. But I am a teacher, and as I understand it, rabbi means teacher. But I'll be careful with that one. So right off the bat, I got everybody shunning and despising and holding me to no account. It's hard to believe it's happening. I went through that. I told God 2 years into the refinement. I looked at him and I said, I know you're God and everything. We were just kind of chatting on a walk. I said, I know you're God and everything, but you know what? I still can't believe it. I can't believe you exist. Which makes him laugh. And I get a perception of him laughing, and or the laugh you just heard, that's him and me. See, we share this body. I mean, there can be a manifestation of any one of us in here, the angel, who you can almost always spot. Okay, it's actually the opposite, isn't it? You spot when it's God, particularly the words that come out. But really, the angel is the, quote, creator of my personality. They did molded me from the day one. Lots of people don't like me and haven't liked me in my life, but by and large, particularly the way my life went, I can get along with just about anybody. Include the homeless out there. Since God took me from the land of the living, and I've been doing this with God for 13 years, but I haven't worked. I get room and board at to help take care of my parents at their place. And I just recently started getting Social Security, so that's been a real blessing, which is why I got my stimulus check. That's how I got this equipment to do videos. So, Gentiles in general will despise and shun the man who startles nations and silences their leaders for announcing that he is the anointed one the Jewish people had been waiting for, and that Jesus cannot be the man described in Isaiah 53. He's unblemished, and he's a Jew. Can't be. You got to be blemished, and you got to be a Gentile. God's crafty that way. The Jewish people will despise and shun him for the reason they expect and have been taught that the anointed one is Jewish, not a Gentile, and the era of exaltation, redemption, restoration, the Messianic era, they have been taught will not be occurring. They're not going to want to hear it. Who is he to say that? It is the nature of people to reject, despise, and hold to no account a man who has no visible proof to substantiate his claims that God speaks to him, as God spoke to Moses, that he is a man prophesied to come in the Hebrew Bible, that he is the messenger and deliverer of covenants of God, and that the Spirit of the Holy God has alighted upon him. I tell you this, the biggest part of Isaiah 53 is verse 10. God chose to crush him with disease, that he would offer himself for guilt. I've already explained that, be given long life. Okay, I got colon cancer in 2001. I survived it. They took it out, took chemo, but unfortunately, it had spread to my lungs. We found out. And by the time they had found out, they just said, it's untreatable. It's too advanced. I said, what does that mean? They said, you're going to die and you're going to die real soon. I took that to mean a month or so. And I walked out of there, and I've never seen a doctor again until just recently for a general checkup. Never went back, never treated, and it's when the planes hit New York 20 years ago. Now, if that isn't a man crushed with disease, because it did. I quit working. I was just walking every day in a daze. You know, I can't believe I'm going to die, especially after defeating the colon cancer. And that's my proof. And all that can be verified. All that can be verified. I mean, I know they can. I've found medical records far older than 20 years before in court cases. But he's a man of suffering, familiar with disease. God's righteous servant will be a man who has a life full of injuries and wounds. I was shot through the abdomen when I was 18. I impaled my right knee on a broken Coke bottle and was just about crippled. I don't know, I've got almost 15 surgical scars from one thing or another. Lots of accidents. Used to call myself accident prone. Accustomed to illness and disease. Illness. When I was born, premature, 7 months, disfigured, afflicted by God. No right breast, no withered right arm. They said just take him out. He's too sick. He can't eat. His insides aren't formed well enough. He's not going to make it. And shouldn't have made it when I got gunshot. Shouldn't have made it when I had colon cancer. They didn't think I was going to make it. And then they just flat out said, that's it for you with lung cancer. So I've been through all that. And that doesn't sound like Jesus Christ to me. See, that's the kind of sickness that'll bring you to grief. That's how they write it. They don't have disease. They say sickness. But you got to remember, he has to be exposed to death. Well, I got exposed to death all those times. Jesus never got exposed to death. No, he died. Exposure is, you see it, it almost happens, but you get on by it. That's exposure. Okay, I'm going to start asking this. We got to get past this shun despise. We got to do this for Israel and for God, for Hashem. Me, I'm a servant. Yeah, benefits me too. But with every Jew, share these videos with every Jewish person you know and ask them, what do you think? And I'm including secular, observant, non-observant, because part of my task as Elijah is to bring people back to synagogue, and I come with a covenant of sin forgiveness. Everybody's clay is clean. You know, so let's come back and be observant, honor God for what he's done for you. To look away and say, whatever you've done in your lives, don't even think about Yom Kippur. Because I know some people think, I got some sins, God's not, I could go to 1,000 Yom Kippurs and he wouldn't forgive me. Well, you're forgiven. Don't let the evil inclination get you again.